Okay, and welcome back. Welcome to our unidentified segment with Little K.
Yes, absolutely. This is going to be kind of a special segment because I want to talk about good news. The unidentified, the nature of it very rarely has any good news, right? And I knew that when I started this whole multimedia project that there's not a lot of good news involved in this.
That's right.
But we do have some good news today. I want to start off with I got this book right here that I started years ago. When I started writing about unidentified people and I started realizing how many of them there were, I got a book with stuff on every one of them, all 120 something of them in North Carolina. And it helps me keep things organized, and I can just add to it as I go.
That's good.
All of this coincides. Each entry in the book coincides with the file that I have of all the autopsies and different information. I keep everything together, and because hopefully the goal is that even if we don't get any of them resolved ourselves, we talked about earlier in the K files about how you lose that institutional memory, and that's when I'm coming across all these cases. Nobody remembers them.
Right.
So our goal here is to make it to where people will remember them going forward. Right. They'll have a place to go.
Exactly.
On the WHIG's YouTube page and in the newspapers and online and Facebook, there'll be a place to go for these cases. All right. So on page 50 of that notebook, I've got the entry there. This was a woman that was skeleton was found in Goldsboro in 2001, right? So they found the skeleton in 2001. I've been asking law enforcement about this case very recently for a different reason that we'll get into for a minute.
Right.
But the skeleton was identified 2 weeks ago as Felicia Coleman, right?
Okay.
She was reported missing in Goldsboro in 2001, right? So the skeleton was found in the same area about 3 weeks after Felicia disappeared. So you've got a missing woman, 3 weeks later a skeleton's found.
Right.
Right? You would think that would, in the same area of the county.
Right.
But what had happened is that the cops didn't put the two cases together because the medical examiner determined that the skeleton belonged to a man, right? So they didn't even look at it. And I'm not knocking them because you go with what the evidence you have, but so the medical examiner says that this skeleton belonged to a man. So she's remained a missing person for 20 years,
that's a shame.
and the skeleton has remained unidentified for 20 years.
Yeah.
So in 2011, which was 10 years ago, and 10 years after she went missing and the skeleton was found,
right,
the medical examiner finally got around to doing a DNA test and determined that, oh wait, no, the skeleton was actually a female, right? Now, and I'm trying really hard not to criticize anybody. I really am, but it goes back to that institutional memory that we were talking about.
Right, yeah.
That as soon as it was discovered that that was a woman and not a man skeleton, you would think that detectives would be all over that.
Yeah, absolutely, they should.
But we don't know we don't know when the medical examiner's office conveyed that to the authorities. We don't know where that information went within the department.
Right.
And we don't know if there was anybody that was investigating the case that would have known, oh, wait a minute, there was a woman that went missing back then. Right? So it took a whole nother decade to put that together. 10 years to put that together. So now, I give my hats off to this detective. They got a new detective that was assigned the unidentified body. No, I'm sorry. He was assigned the missing persons case last year, right? So he's assigned the missing persons case, and about a year and a half ago, and he got DNA from the family, and I don't think they were even aware of the body.
Wow.
So they ran the DNA in the NamUs system, and it came back a match to the body that had been there the whole time. So the DNA came back as the skeleton, so they were able to solve that case. Now I know there's a Wilson case right now where there was a skull found at the bottom of Buckhorn Reservoir. Nope, wrong skull. We'll get to that in a second, Brittany. I knew when I have keywords for her to know when to put up something, and I knew right when I said skull, I was like, man, she's gonna put that up. No, hold on for a second. There was a skull that was found in Buckhorn Reservoir in Wilson, and they thought it was a woman's skull. So for years they but then recently they did DNA and they found it's a man's skull. I believe that the Wilson PD has identified that person. I've written about this in the Wilson Times. I believe they've identified that person, but they're holding off to saying who it is, probably trying to solve the murder.
Right.
Because the skull had 2 bullet holes in it.
Right.
So maybe they knew, Goldsboro knew the connection prior to now, but they were holding off trying to do more investigation. And I asked about it, maybe that they said, well, we better go ahead and do it before, I don't know. So I'm not pointing fingers at anybody.
Right.
But the cases, in hindsight, it looks easy, right? In hindsight, you're like, well, there was a woman missing, there's a skeleton found, it's not rocket science.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that the public is never wary of. But 20 years does seem like a long time.
That's a long time.
So a family member contacted me a little while back about a missing persons case in Robeson County, right? And he thought that a skull, here you go, Brittany, now it's the skull time. This poor woman's skull was found in Asheboro about 25 years ago, right? And that's a clay model of what they think she looked like. Now, I'm gonna tell you this: when that guy who thought that was his mother, I had written a story about this in the Asheboro paper about 7 or 8 years ago, and he found it online one night. And when he sent me the picture of his mother, it looked exactly like that.
Really?
Anybody I showed that to.
Wow.
Said, wow. So I encouraged him to go talk to law enforcement up in Asheboro. And he went and talked to them, and they interviewed him for 5 hours.
Good
and
Lord.
At the end of the 5 hours, they concluded that it was her. Right? Okay, so they say, well, we think it's her, but we need to run a DNA test. So they got DNA from him, and they were going to compare it to the skeleton in Asheboro and see if it was her. Okay, so he submitted the DNA, and then they told him that it would take a year to find out whether it would take a year to find out whether that was his mother or not. Right? So he's heartbroken, understandably so. He's waited 30 years. His mother's been missing for 30 years.
So
he thinks he's finally found her. Got another year to go. Well, when he talked to me about that, I was like, what can I do? Because this is this is Asheboro. This is not, So the only thing I know about Asheboro is the zoo, right? Well, actually, I did
that's
write.
what we think of.
That's right. I did write some stories down there a few years back, freelance. So anyway, so I'm thinking, what can I do? What can I do? So I called Lisa Barnes. Got a picture of Lisa Barnes here in case you've been under a rock and don't know what she looks like. So she starts talking to some senators from that area. And once she got involved, the wait time dropped from a year to about 20 days.
Wow, is that not something?
Right, so my hat's off to her for that, right? So the 20 days went by, the DNA came back, it is not the gentleman's mother.
Oh, gosh.
Right, but at least he knows.
He knows.
And he didn't have to wait a year to find out. So, the good news is the lady in Goldsboro identified, right? But then here's something that's really troubling, and it doesn't seem to bother people that much. And that is, out of the 125 bodies, unidentified bodies in North Carolina, there's a lot of them that have never had a DNA test. And the bodies are just sitting up in Raleigh, and there's never been a test done. Now, usually the investigating agency is responsible for paying for the DNA test.
Right.
Well, the problem in a lot of these cases are there is no investigating agency, because when this body showed up 30, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, certain agencies, and we wrote about this in the LaCama case, where nobody wants to take responsibility for this body.
Right.
So, and they're not all murders, right? So you find a body out in the woods. It could be a murder, or it could be a homeless man that froze to death.
Yeah.
Whatever. So a lot of agencies don't want to take on the responsibility of another unsolved case, so they write it off as a unintended death.
Right.
So these unintended deaths just float around out there with no one looking into them. And we see what happened in the Goldsboro case, where you got a missing person and a body in the same area, but they never put it together because no one's until they assign a detective to it, right? Full time. So here's what I'm saying. I've gotten different estimates on how much a DNA test costs. I've heard everything from $700 to $2,000, right? That's not a lot of money.
Right.
It's a lot of money to me, right? But it's not a lot of money to the state. And I've been asking some politicians and talking to them. I talked to Senator Barnes about it. We missed the budget this year. This all came about at the time they were putting the budget together, so we didn't have enough time to get it in there now. But I talked to Representative Gaillard too, who is, that's our people. But the thing that just really bothers me is we can give Bailey $3 million for a sewer system, which they need. I'm not knocking. I report on Bailey all the time. They need the money for the sewer system. Spring Hope's getting some money for the sewer system. That's great. I got no problem with that. But I just cannot believe that the state of North Carolina can't come up with 70. I added them all up. I did some math to give DNA tests to all these unidentified bodies, and to look for DNA for all of the long-term missing persons, peoples, to match these cases up. It wouldn't take no more than $70,000 for all the cases.
Wow.
So
$70,000.
we could solve, we sit here and we do all these, week after week, we tell all these stories, and we've made a difference with a few cases.
Right.
But as evidenced by Goldsboro, and keep in mind the Goldsboro thing happened after I was talking to politicians about all of this, right? So maybe that'll help the cause a little bit. But in the state budget, that's billions of dollars. North Carolina state budget, billions of dollars. We can't find $70,000 to solve all these unidentified body cases. Now I won't solve every one of them, but I guarantee you, there's 120.
It'll solve some of them.
Right. There's 120 unidentified body cases, and there's like 380 missing persons cases.
Right.
And we saw with the Goldsboro case that you had a missing person, an unidentified body. It's the same case.
Right.
The Wilson case, when they finally admit to it, they've got an unidentified body, and they've got a missing person. It's the same case.
Right.
So some of these unidentified bodies will probably never be identified, especially there's a lot of migrant workers and stuff that are in the mix. They're from Honduras or whatever. But a lot of these missing persons cases, NamUs has 3 columns. You've got missing people, unidentified bodies, and unknown persons. Now, the unknown persons is really weird, because there are people, I know it sounds like a soap opera, but there are people who wake up and don't know who they are. And you have to figure out who they are, right? They don't have no family, they're homeless, they don't know who they are. Okay, that's very rare. So in the columns, you got a lot of missing persons. Because let's face it, not every missing person is dead. They're in Las Vegas or whatever.
Right.
So you got a lot of missing persons.
You don't think about these things,
And you gotta-
till we
right.
bring it up.
You got a lot of unidentified bodies. So if you put the DNA for all of these unidentified bodies, it costs you $70,000 to do, and you put them into the system. And a lot of these missing persons cases have the DNA already done because there's political pressure to find missing people. There's no political pressure to identify bodies, although it's the same thing. We could probably solve half of them in a day if they would do that. Tell me, folks, tell me. Think about it at home. Why are we not doing that?
Right.
Right? Easy fix, a cheap fix for the state of North Carolina to lead the way and be the first one.
Absolutely.
Because no one's doing it. Right?
No.
All right, that's it. We'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back right after this.